Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me. Today we are returning to Fallout 76, where we're going to spend another 1000 scrip on 3-star ranged legendary weapons, and as always, I'll take a few moments to speak about what makes each weapon good, bad, or indifferent. Remember, if you enjoy content like this, please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps the channel out, and it doesn't cost you anything. Alright, let's go on ahead and get started here. So for our first roll today, we get a Hunter's Pipe bolt-action pistol with bullets exploding for area damage and +1 agility. So the Hunter's effect is one of the Slayer's effects, and all the Slayer's effects recently got a buff to +50% damage, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, the Hunter's effect is probably one of the less useful of the Slayer's effects because there's just not that many situations where you're going to be out hunting animals. You know, sure, there are the occasional daily challenges for death claws or whatever and things like that, but there's just not that many situations where you're going to be intentionally going out and hunting animals, so it's just not going to get a whole lot of use that way, and it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to keep a weapon around specifically for that. The bolts exploding for area damage is an excellent effect. It does a little bit of extra damage to the target as well as some extra damage to nearby targets if they happen to be close enough. They have to be pretty close, but still, it's useful. On a weapon like this, it's especially good because the pipe bolt action pistol is a very slow firing weapon. You can mod it out to be a rifle as well. But if you're looking to use a weapon like this as a rifle, you're probably better off with the hunting rifle. It'll do a little bit better damage, and overall, it's basically the same thing, just a little bit better damage. But if you want to use a pistol for slow, hard hitting, then pretty much this is your option right here, or the Gauss pistol. And bullets exploding for area damage on this does make it so you're going to get some extra damage and make it much more possible to get those one-shot kills, which you really need to be doing with a weapon this slow. The +1 agility, that's a good thing. I mean, it gives you some more VATS AP, it gives you some more stealth, which you can put a suppressor on this weapon, so using it stealthy is a very viable option. And getting a little bit of extra stealth and a little bit of extra VATS AP is a good thing, but it's not especially overpowered. So overall, this one's not terrible, but I don't really see anybody looking to make a lot of use out of this one, so let's move on to the next one. And for our second roll, we get a Zealot's Crusader Pistol with 25% faster fire rate and +1 perception. So a Zealot's is another one of the Slayer's effects. This one's probably a little bit more useful than the Hunter's effect, simply because there are definitely times when you're going to be hunting Scorched, such as the Spooky Scorched event or the Holiday Scorched event coming soon. But there's also the Scorch Beast Queen fight that comes up periodically, as well as, you know, you could hunt Scorch Beasts with a weapon that's a Zealot's weapon. So it does have that use going for it. Unfortunately, the Crusader Pistol's probably not the ideal weapon for hunting Scorch Beasts or going to a Scorch Beast Queen fight. Now, if you are a gunslinger build, it's not a terrible choice, but I don't think there's too many players out there using gunslinger build as their main option for those kinds of fights. The 25% faster fire rate, it really is one of the best second stars on the right weapon. Unfortunately, the Crusader Pistol cannot be modded out to be fully automatic. It's only a semi-automatic weapon, which means it's already firing as fast as you can pull the trigger. The 25% faster fire rate on a weapon like that is not really doing a whole lot. It's not really going to let you pull the trigger any faster, so it's basically a lost effect on a weapon like this, which is unfortunate. The +1 perception is great because a weapon like this you're probably going to be using in VATS to try to get some extra damage off of the VATS critical shots, because pistols are a bit underpowered in this game, unfortunately. And the +1 perception is going to give you some extra VATS accuracy, which is never a bad thing. Now, if you're not using it in VATS, then it's probably not doing a whole lot for you. Overall, I would say this one's not really a great roll either, so let's move on to the next one. And now we get a Vampire's Short Double Barrel Shotgun with VATS critical hits doing +50% damage and +1 perception. So this one is interesting. The Vampire's effect is very good on fast firing weapons, which this weapon is not, but it's also very good on shotguns because each time you fire a shotgun, it fires 8 pellets, and the damage you see on the damage card is divided up amongst those 8 pellets. But each one of those pellets can trigger the vampire's effect, meaning that when you fire this thing at something, if all 8 pellets hit, you're going to get 8 times the healing off of the vampire's effect. And that's very good. So the vampire's effect is very good on all shotguns. The VATS critical hit's doing plus 50% damage. Well, this is definitely the kind of weapon you could use in VATS if you chose to, and getting some extra damage out of it for those VATS critical hits, that's going to be a good thing. And the plus 1 perception, that synergizes very well with the second star because it is going to give you some extra hit chance and some extra accuracy when using VATS. So overall, this one's not an amazing weapon. The double barrel's not necessarily the best shotgun around, primarily because there's no mod for it to give it any sort of armor penetration, but it does have the highest damage of all the shotguns except the Gauss shotguns. So it does have that going for it, and it reloads relatively quickly. So it's not a terrible roll right here, and I could see someone running around with this and having some fun with it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one. And here we have a Mutant short gamma gun, with the last round in the magazine doing 25%, having a 25% chance to deal double damage, and 25% less VATS AP cost. So I'll start with the first effect, the Mutant's effect. It recently got a buff when all of the other legendary effects got a rebalance as well, and it went from being a flat 10% increase to damage if you're mutated to 25% increased damage if you have 5 mutations. It's 5% per mutation, up to a maximum of 5. So that's a pretty significant increase. Unfortunately, I feel like they should have gone a little bit further, because 25% doesn't compare very well with aristocrats or junkies, for example, that both have plus 50%. But on the other hand, with the Mutant's effect, most high-level players are likely to be running 5 mutations anyway. Most players are going to be running Marsupial and Speed Demon, plus at least 3 or 4 that are useful to their particular build. So, with that in mind, the Mutant's effect doesn't really cost you anything. It's just free damage. You don't have to hoard your caps. You don't have to run around with addictions or anything like that. So that's a good thing. The last round in the magazine having a 25% chance to deal double damage, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know I am not a fan of this effect. It's basically, in my opinion, like not having a legendary effect on the weapon in the second star at all. The 25% chance is just way too low to trigger, and if you play like I do, then if you reload your weapons whenever you have a moment where you're not being attacked and there's no enemies to kill, so that way your magazine will be full when the next enemy shows its face. That doesn't work so well with heavy guns that are using core ammo, but I think most players who are not using those sorts of weapons are probably doing that, and it just makes sense. So if you're doing that, then your 25% chance drops to basically 0% chance, because you're almost never going to fire your last round in the magazine. So definitely a loser on the second star. The third star, the less VATS AP cost, that is an excellent effect. This is definitely the kind of weapon that you could use in VATS, and if you do so, then having it cost less VATS AP cost is definitely going to be beneficial. It's going to keep you firing in VATS more often and help you get more criticals that way. So overall, this one is pretty mediocre. The Gamma Gun it's a decent weapon, it really is. It's just that the ammo is not so easy to farm for it, so it's not especially effective for that reason, and a lot of players will avoid it again for that reason. So let's go on ahead and move on to the next one and see what we get. And here we've got a Suppressor single action revolver with bullets exploding for area damage and plus 1 perception. So the single action revolver is not the best weapon in the game. If you want to play a cowboy sort of build, or have a role-playing reason or something that you want to be using a very stylistic weapon like this, then that's great, and it'll do fine for you for typical daily farming purposes. But you don't see a lot of players running around with a weapon like this because it's a bit underpowered. The Suppressor's effect, it works as advertised, but there's just not a lot of situations in the game where you really need to reduce your target's damage output. Maybe the new daily ops, the decryption ones, are not even that new anymore, but the newish daily ops where the enemies have 90% armor penetration, being able to reduce their damage output might help you survive an extra couple of hits from them, and that could be a good thing, but I'm not sure this is the kind of weapon you would really want to be taking into that sort of a daily op, especially considering that there's no suppressor option for it, so you cannot go stealth with it. The bullets exploding for area damage, that's always a great effect, and on this weapon it's particularly good just because it's going to help compensate a little bit at least for the underpowered nature of the weapon, and the fact that the first star is not doing any extra damage for you either. The third star I've talked about before, the extra perception. It's great if you're going to be using this thing in VATS, which there's a good chance that if you're trying to use a gunslinger weapon, you are, and you'll get some extra accuracy from that perception, but definitely not the most exciting of third stars. So overall, this one's pretty much a dud. Let's go on ahead and see what we get next. And here we get a Suppressor short 10mm submachine gun with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 1 agility. So I talked about the Suppressor's effect on the previous weapon. Not much has changed here. It works as intended, but there's just not a whole lot of situations where it's going to be all that useful for you. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, that is one of my favorite effects in the game on the right weapon. This weapon, it's a little heavy on the AP cost, but it's still very usable in VATS, so it's not necessarily the ideal weapon for that effect, but it can definitely benefit from it. And the plus 50% VATS hit chance, make no mistake, it is an extra damage effect, because it allows you to more effectively target the head or other weak points of the enemy to get some extra damage that way. It also effectively increases the range of most weapons, because it compensates for the accuracy drop-off past the range listed on the card. Yes, you will see some damage drop-off after that range as well, but at least you'll be able to hit your targets, so that's a benefit. And then the plus 1 agility, we talked a little bit about that earlier. It'll give you some more stealth and some more VATS AP, or AP in general, which you can use for sprinting as well. But overall, it's not the most exciting of third stars, so this one, because of the first star overall, is pretty unexciting. Let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we got a Juggernaut's light machine gun with plus 50% VATS hit chance and plus 1 perception. So the light machine gun is an excellent weapon. It's a little hard to keep it fed because the 308 ammo, you don't craft a whole ton of that, and this thing will burn through it very quickly because of its very high fire rate. But it does decent damage over time. Its damage per shot is not particularly exciting, but over time it does very good damage. It's one of the better heavy weapons in the game if you can keep it fed and are willing to go through that effort. The Juggernaut's effect, it's not a terrible effect. It's basically the opposite of the bloodied effect. It lets you have up to plus 25% damage when your health is at full 100%. I'm not a big fan of that effect because I feel like it's just too low. I feel like they should have given Juggernauts the plus 50% that junkies and aristocrats have, simply because it's not as hard or as easy as you might think to stay at 100% health all the time. Especially with a loud weapon like this. As soon as you start firing it, the enemies are going to know where you are and they're going to start firing back at you. Additionally, if you just pick up a couple of rads from the environment, you're going to be knocked off of 100% and your damage is going to decrease. So, overall, the Juggernaut's effect is not exciting in my opinion. The plus 50% VATS hit chance, I mentioned it before, it's a great effect. In my opinion, it's one of the best second stars on the right weapon. This is definitely not the right weapon for it. This weapon, I'm not sure what its actual per shot AP cost is, but because of its extremely high fire rate, it is just going to burn through your AP very, very quickly. So it's not going to be a very effective VATS weapon. You might be able to use it to find your targets, fire at them in VATS until you're out of AP, and then just finish them off while you are hip firing or aiming down the sights. But overall, I don't see a lot of players trying to make heavy use out of VATS with a weapon like this, which unfortunately also makes the third star less exciting. It synergizes very well with the second star, but it does not synergize well with the weapon. The primary benefit of the plus 1 perception is the VATS accuracy, so overall it's not going to do a whole lot for you here. So let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we have a Zealot's Gatling Laser with VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage and plus 1 perception. We're seeing a lot of the same effects today. So the Zealot's effect we talked about earlier. It's not necessarily the best of the Slayer's effects, but it definitely has uses. And on a heavy weapon like this, you could definitely take something like this to the Scorchbeast Queen fights or go hunting Scorchbeast and have a reasonable time. Unfortunately, this is a Gatling laser, not the Ultrasight Gatling laser, so its damage will be a little bit subpar compared to the Ultrasight Gatling laser. The VATS critical hits doing plus 50% damage. This is not really a weapon you're going to use in VATS for the same reason as the light machine gun. Its per shot VATS usage might not be that high, but it has an extremely high fire rate that's just going to chew through your VATS or your AP very, very quickly. So, for the same reason as on the light machine gun we talked about earlier, the +1 perception is not particularly exciting on this one either. It synergizes well with the second effect, but not the weapon, because of all of it's really giving is the additional VATS accuracy. So, once again, nothing too exciting here. Let's go on ahead and move on to the next one. And here we have a Gorermans Black Powder Pistol, with bullets exploding for area damage and 15% faster reload. So, the Black Powder Pistol, it's very, very slow firing, so it's the type of weapon that you really need to try and get one-shot kills with, because you have to reload it every time that you fire it, and you're going to take some time to reload it, which is going to leave you vulnerable. The Gorermans effect gives you plus 12% damage for each of your hunger and thirst meters, as long as they're 100% full, for a total of 24% extra damage if they're both full. That's not particularly exciting, especially when you compare it to junkies or aristocrats, or especially bloodied. Then that's not going to do a whole lot for you. The other drawback with Gorermans is that no matter how diligent you are with keeping your character fed and hydrated, their meters are going to decrease over time, and your extra damage from that Gorermans effect is going to be reduced as well. So, how frequently you're actually going to see that 24%, I'm not sure. It'll vary definitely from player to player, but for me it would not be all that often. The bullets exploding for area damage, talked about it before, it's a very good effect, does some extra damage to the target as well as nearby targets if they're close enough. On a weapon like this, it's very helpful because it will help you get those extra, or get you more of those one-shot kills, which is what you really, really need to make a weapon like this effective. The 15% faster reload, that is very good on something like this. So, something that's going to be reloading literally after every shot, anything you can do to increase that or to improve that reload speed is going to help you out a lot. So that 3rd star is probably the best 3rd star for a weapon like this. Overall, I don't think this one's very exciting, although if you really are somebody who wants to run around and shoot things with a Black Powder Pistol, this may be one of your better options. So let's go on ahead and move on to the last one here. And here we got a 2-shot Gatling Plasma, with the last round in the magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage and 25% less VATS AP cost. So the 2-shot effect is not one of my favorites in general. What it does is it fires an additional shot, and it gives an extra 25% damage to the weapon, the base damage of the weapon, but it divides that damage, the total damage, the 125%, between the 2 shots. So that also makes the armor apply twice for the damage. That's not a great thing, and in a lot of cases you're not really going to see too much extra damage because of that. As an additional drawback, it also reduces the accuracy of the weapon. So overall, I just am not a fan of the 2-shot effect. It does work very well with explosive weapons, whether it's because the weapon's natively explosive like a grenade launcher, or because the weapon has the explosive legendary effect. But in most other cases, it's just unexciting. The last round in a magazine having 25% chance to deal double damage, well, I talked about that before. Now, this is a core weapon. It uses plasma cores, so you do have the drawback that if you reload the weapon before you've used the last round in the magazine or in the core, then you're going to end up with a bunch of partially used cores in your inventory. So most players who are running something like a Gatling Plasma are not going to be reloading it tactically like I talk about with most other weapons for that reason. But even so, one standard plasma core, it has, I believe, 250 rounds in it. So out of 250 rounds, when you finally get down to the last one, it has a 25% chance to deal double damage. That's not exciting. If you just figure out pure statistics, that's one shot out of every 1,000 that will do double damage. It's basically like not having a legendary effect at all. The 25% less VATS AP cost, it really is one of the best third stars on a weapon that is good for VATS. This weapon is not ideal for VATS. That third star can make it more useful for VATS, and I have a friend who does use Gatling Plasmas in VATS to some extent. He can't use them the same way that a commando uses a rifle, but where it's basically every shot is from VATS, but he uses it very frequently. So he actually loves that effect on this. I don't think most other players would find nearly as much use as him, however. I know I wouldn't. When I'm running heavy guns, I am using hip firing or aiming down the sights. So overall, not exciting. So we didn't really get anything good this week, but we'll try again next week. I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for watching.